Hello everybody, and welcome to fourth iOS Talks. Today Vedran is going to talk about libraries every iOS developer should know about. Damjan is going to talk about Deferred and Promise principle, and Igor is going to talk about using multiple UINavigationControllers and about showing how can it be used to create cool navigational interface. So without further ado, let's start with Vedran's presentation.
Hi everybody, I am Vedran. Today I will talk about top 5 libraries that I think every developer should use. Just a second to start the presentation. Okay, so a few words about iOS developer community. It is evolving at extremely fast rate. Many developers also contribute to the community. For example, GitHub has over than 50,000 Objective-C library alone. Other place that users can share their code is Bitbucket, and that is great for all of us that use third-party codes because there is no need to reinvent the wheel. If we have the solution ready on GitHub, we can painlessly integrate it in our project, and that becomes very easy if you use CocoaPod. If you haven't heard for it, that is Dependency Manager, and you can check it out at cocopod.org. Okay, these are 5 libraries that I will talk about: AF Networking, JasonModel, Magical Record, and SD-Web Image and BlockSkid. Let's start with AF Networking. This is the most popular third-party code on GitHub. It has been favorited around 12,000 times. It has more than 200 contributors. It is very fast networking library. It uses blocks and Grand Central Dispatch. It is constantly evolving. And this is a great example on how open source projects should be run, because, as I said, there are 200 contributors, and some time ago version 2 came out, so I will talk about changes. First change is NSRL session compatibility. This is a new class in iOS 7. It replaces NSRL connection, which hasn't been deprecated yet, but it probably will be in a few years. AF Networking 2 is modular. That means that AF Networking 1 had many things placed in one class. For example, AF HTTP connection that was divided in AF Request Manager and AF HTTP Session Manager. It also provides real-time connection. It can keep connection open with remote server at all time, and it can implement SSL pinning. Automate. This is an example for GET and PASS request. It is self-explanatory. You see AF HTTP request operation manager that I talked about earlier. The second library I would like to talk about is JasonModel.
Can you just wait?
Okay.
For 1 second, it seems that we lost picture for unknown reason. So, technical problems always. Let's just try to turn off the screen sharing and turn it back on. Okay. Now you have your presentation back on, and you can continue.
Thanks. Okay, just to quickly recap AF networking. We talked about NSRL session that is new in iOS 7 that replaces NSRL connection. AF networking 2 is modular. That means that it divided some code in more classes. It uses real-time. It can use real-time connection. It can open a connection to remote server at all times, and it automatically has implemented SSL pinning. These are two examples of AF networking usage: GET and PAST requests. They are self-explanatory. You can see that we use here AF HTTP request operation manager we talked about earlier. It is very simple to use. We have success and failure block in which we can further code according to our needs. Second library I would like to talk about is JasonModel. It is used for fast creation of smart data models from JSON response from the server. It can automatically map JSON model to your model classes, and that means that it will drastically reduce your code and time to code your app. Here is the most simple explanation. Top picture is the response from server with some object, let's call it project model, which contains ID, name, and price. We will create our subclass of JSON model with properties, integer, float, string, ID, name, and price, and JSON model takes care of it. We simply initialize the JSON object with dictionary, and it will parse it all along. The next slide, here is a more complicated example. This is a response which contains an NS array of products we talked about in the last slide. On the right image, we see product model object, and it can contain array of product models. And JSON model will also take care of it automatically. If we receive JSON response with underscore attributes, JSON model can also convert it automatically to our properties. We simply initialize the key mapper, or if we need some custom configuration, we can always write our own code with correct properties as shown below. Third-party iOS code library I would like to talk about is Magical Record, which simplifies core data usage. It has been inspired by the ease of Ruby on Rails active record fetching. It really speeds up your development process as well. It cleans up your core data code, and it allows for clear, simple one-line fetches, and you can also modify these fetches when you require optimizations. Here are some methods in which you can see how easy it is to use Magical Record. Of course, creating, retrieving objects, updating it or removing the objects. And of course, these changes won't be made until we save the context. Okay, on the next slide, I have an example of core data code in which I would like to fetch all person objects and which contain property name Vedran. You can see that there are like 15 lines of code, and the next slide is replacement with Magical Record. You can see this is one line of code, and we order it by age here in this example, which this example does not use. So it is really great, it's fast, and it is trivial. The fourth library I would like to talk about is SDWebImage, which you should use if you download images from the web. The library contains UINavigationControllers categories, and the download is asynchronous. And what is really great about SDWebImage that it handles caching automatically, and it guarantees that main thread will never be blocked. Here is an example of table view cell usage, which will download thumbnail for the cell. We are interested in the bottom line of code where we use setImageWithURL method, and that is all we have to set. Asynchronous download and caching is handled by the library itself. You can also use blocks to perform the same operation. You have the completion block where you can specify your custom code, or you can use the SD Web Image Manager, in which you can specify some options specified in SD Web Image Manager, or you can track the progress of downloading and maybe show some progress HUD. And of course, you have the completion block again at the bottom of the code. And the final library I would like to talk about, which I discovered recently, is BlocksKit. As quoted by the author, this is the Objective-C block utilities you always wish you had. It provides block-based code on iOS framework classes, and that also means, again, that it really speeds up your development. It really makes your code smaller. I will show you that in later examples. Okay, here is an example of using alert view, initializing with custom title message. I've put the tag here because maybe we will have multiple alert views, and that means in the bottom alert view delegate, we will have to handle it appropriately. You can see that there are lines like 10, 15 lines of code, and the code is not in the same place. You will probably have some other code of view controller in the middle. And the next example is with using the BlocksKit. Everything is in one place. You have block in which you can handle tapping the button, and if you need a second UI alert view, you can just create it with another method. No need for tags or delegate methods. Here is an example of usage with WebView. Again, everything in one place, no need for delegates, everything is clean. And for final example, here is how to make UI view tap and double tap callbacks without delegates again, and without selectors. Everything in one place. It's really great. And maybe you saw that we use S3 Progress HUD. No, we did not forget about it. I think that it is pretty popular and you should already know about it. It's Progress HUD, which is very, really lightweight. It's created as singleton. You can modify it and configure it in one place. And if you didn't use it already, you should. And that is all about my presentations. If you have any questions, please pose them.
Do here if anybody have questions? Or everybody is using all the panels. Okay, thank you, Vedran. So, the next presentation is Damjan. You can introduce yourself.
Myself? Yeah. Hello, I'm Damjan.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Click.
And I need to find
your presentation. You could do that while you were, while people could see you and not.
Thank you, Matej. Hello, everyone. I'm Damjan, and today I will talk to you about the deferred and promise pattern. Now, let's start with the problem which this pattern offers a solution for. The problem is very simple. It's representing and handling a value which is not currently known, but will be known in the future. Okay, so if you Google this stuff, you'll find a lot of articles and a lot of different implementations across a lot of different libraries, across a lot of different languages. The promise itself is a pattern which is very old. It's from the 1970s, and it's somewhat similar to future and to deferred, and all of these are mostly referred to as the same thing, which makes grasping the entire concept a bit more confusing. For instance, on the Wikipedia, futures are referred to as read-only placeholder views of a variable, while the promise is referred to as a writable placeholder view of a variable. To be fair, the distinction is made only if the two are referred to as different things, but if not, they are mostly referred to as the same thing. When you go to implementations of this, it gets a bit more confusing. For instance, in the jQuery implementation of the pattern, a promise is actually a read-only version of the deferred object. So, if you find all of this a bit confusing, be at ease. I did also after a lot of Googling, but we'll do some definitions and then we'll go to the code. So, a deferred can be referred to as an object for managing asynchronous code. It's a solution for blocking code. As I defined the problem earlier, it's a question of waiting for some variable to change its state or to have a defined state if before that it's undefined. So this is the problem of blocking code. A promise is a bit more important for you to understand. This is an object which gets returned when expecting a result which will be known in the future. It promises a return value, and that's why it's called a promise. Deferreds and promises are mostly the same thing, but because of implementations, we'll refer to them as different things, and you'll understand this when we get to the code. So, as far as definitions goes, it's important to understand that the deferred object has two methods, which are resolve and reject. Each time I say one of these, you can imagine in your head the success and the failure blocks, which we are all very used to. The promise object itself, this encapsulates the value which we're talking about. And it has three states which are important. It's fulfilled, resolved, and rejected. And as you may guess it, unfulfilled is the state which is in before the future value is known. And resolved or rejected is when it's unknown, or if we're, for some business logic, unsatisfied with the value we got, or if we had some errors. Then is a very important method also used on promise object. It's used for chaining multiple promises, and this is a very powerful feature of this pattern, which we'll get to later. For now, you can imagine the then method as being used for linking multiple promises together, or linking multiple success blocks or failure blocks together. Okay. Before this, I also wanted to say that this pattern is very popular in JavaScript, and it's been introduced in JavaScript about 3 years ago in jQuery, which doesn't have the implementation of the promise pattern in jQuery is somewhat problematic. It's much better in the Q library, from what I've understood, and some other libraries. It's also very popular in the Python world, in the Twisted framework. But, as I've said, we're not here to talk about other languages. We're here to talk about Objective-C. You have multiple libraries which implement this pattern. The most popular one is, I think, PromiseKit. We'll cover another library here, which is MO-Promises. You also have libraries beside that. Some are very old, but these ones are fresh and very well implemented. The OMP-Promises is attested in fully documented promises library inspired by the promises/A proposal, which is for JavaScript. And it has certain additions and changes to better fit the common Objective-C pattern. I just read the description by Oliver Mader, who made this library, and you can find it on GitHub and access it very easily via CocoaPods. So let's get into the library, and by going through this library, you'll get a better understanding of how the pattern actually works. The entire library boils down to two classes, which we immediately like because we don't like big libraries. This is very simple. And after this, we'll go through methods of only the important methods of these two classes and cover some of their properties. And after that, we'll cover some use cases, which you are dying to get to right about now. So, as far as the deferred class is concerned, the important this class is actually very simple because the deferred has less logic than the promise class. These are actually all the methods you have on this class. It's deferred for a constructor is promise. Here you need to remember that you get the promise from the deferred object. You'll understand this later. You have two methods which are very important, which is the fulfill and the fail method, and this is analog to success and failure blocks. And each time I say a fulfill or failure block, you can remember these two, and you'll get a better grasp of what the solution is. Progress and cancellation are not so much important. Progress is used for monitoring the progress of a value, and cancellation is a nice feature of this library, but it's not so much talked about in the promise pattern. Now, as far as the promise class is concerned, this one is much more important. We have several properties which are also important for the class itself, that is for the object. We have the state. Now this is very important. A state of a promise can be unfulfilled, fail, or fulfilled. And this is regarding to the problematic that I described. We are actually handling values which are not yet known. But we want to have a representation of those values in the present time, although we will know them in the future. So as you might have guessed it, a promise will have an unfulfilled state when this value is not known, and it will have a failed or fulfilled state depending on logic that you implemented for yourself. ID result property is very important. It's the value which we are talking about. Error is also important. It's used for the failure block. And we also have progress and cancellation, which are not so much important for the whole pattern. One more thing I wanted to say about the states, and this is very important, is that unfulfilled and failed and fulfilled states are mutually exclusive, and therefore the block codes which get executed, that is success and failure blocks, are also mutually exclusive. This is an important aspect of the pattern, and it governs the logic very well. Now we'll get to methods on the promises class, that is OMP promises class. I won't cover all methods. These are the categories of the methods in the documentation. They are creation, building promise chains, registering callbacks, cancellation, and combinators and transformers. The ones we need to cover are building promise chains and registering callbacks and combinators and transformers. So let's get to them. As far as building promise chains are concerned, in the documentation you'll mostly find the then method. This is used for linking promises, and what it actually does is when you implement this method, it returns another promise, and that promise again can also have a then block which can return another promise. This can obviously go for a long while, and the best thing about it is that you can separate logic. For instance, an example of an API call, you can have the first promise worry about the return value which you get from the server. You can have the next return promise worry about handling the data locally, and also the next promises. You can have multiple promises and blocks to conceptually separate logic regarding handling that data, and in the end have it, let's say, displayed to the user in some fashion. The nice thing about this is if any of these blocks, any of these promises enter an unfulfilled state, which analog is the failure block, the whole thing will short circuit. And the error will actually get propagated through all the promises. Rescue is used for propagating these errors, and you can handle error for each promise individually. Now, registering callbacks is also very important. We have fulfilled, failed, and progressed. Fulfilled, and failed are more important, and this is actually the logic you will have be handled when the future value becomes present, when it gets known. This is, let's say, updating the UI when you get a certain value from the server regarding the API example. Now, combinators and transformers are also a powerful aspect of this pattern. You have join, chain, any, and all. Any and all are very interesting. You can use these to combine multiple promises and have logic which executes if all of them are fulfilled or if any of them are fulfilled. You can imagine, we'll actually cover one of these methods in an example which follows, so I won't talk about it here, but you'll get a better feeling of it through code. So let's get to an example. Let's say we have multiple URL requests to handle, and we want to have a certain joint logic after each of them is executed. This is a method wrote with IF networking, and here you need to notice in the success and failure block you don't have much logic, except before making the request you made the referred object. And now, in the success block, you call fulfilled on it with the response you got from the API. And in the failure block, you call failure on it with the appropriate error. And you on the end of the method, you actually return the deferred. You can return the deferred, but in this example, we return the promise made from the deferred. And this is an important aspect of the entire pattern. The return will execute synchronously, which means that immediately you have the return value somehow encapsulated. And it's encapsulated in the promise object, although the fulfillment and failure blocks will execute asynchronously. Now, let's say you have multiple calls made with this method, and with it, you would get multiple promises. Here in this example, we have an array of URL requests. And in each array, the interesting thing to notice here is that we don't have a failure block for handling failures for each URL request individually, but we only handle fulfillment blocks. This is because we'll have only one error block which will be executed if any of those fail. I've also added a progress block here, but it's not so much interesting. So once you have this array of promises, you can use the promise class with the all method and pass the array of the promises. And what you will get here is that only if every API request gets the success block executed, will some fulfillment block here be executed. Let's say you would display something to the user only if all API calls are successful, and you have only one failure block which tells the user in this particular scenario that at least one request didn't go as planned. This is the all method. The any method would be, as you might guess, that would have a fulfilled block executed if only one, if one or more URL requests were successful, and the failure block if all of them were unsuccessful. Okay, that's about it. The main question which is proposed here is, do we really need another library for this? Because this is another level of abstraction. And we have asynchronous code handled very well in Objective-C, as you already know. So actually what it is up to the project and up to the developers as always. Especially when you have nice libraries like Reactive Cocoa, which can use to handle much of this logic and the native way of handling asynchronous code, which is also very easy to use. So yeah, thank you for this, and any questions?
Everything is clear, and you can start using Deferred and Promise from tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, in that case, thank you, Damjan. Okay. Next presentation is Igor.
Hi everyone, I'm Igor.
And you can start talking while we prepare your...
Okay. Next topic is a bit different. Now we're going to talk about building a custom UI interface consisting of multiple UI navigation controllers, and what we are trying to do now is to... Mate, is it going?
I'm trying to open your presentation, and I cannot open your presentation.
Why is that?
Can you zip it and send it over the Skype, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Or maybe we can invite you to the Hangouts. So today it seems that we have a lot of technical problems. Okay. And while you're doing that, in case it fails, try to join the Hangout. Philip, can you forward the link to him? Well, I'll try to open it.
Okay.
You sent me the wrong file.
How did I do that?
Zip it. And I'm not meaning like shut up, I mean like archive the presentation and then send it.
Okay.
Okay. And while it's sending, try to join the Hangouts in case it won't work again.
Okay.
But let's hope it will. Where is it?
Custom tab one. There it is. Agree to the terms.
And it's working.
Okay.
That's really great. We can switch to our presentation. Oh, yeah,
Sure. Okay, let's start again. My name is Igor, and I will be talking about building a custom tab-like navigation interface using multiple UI navigation controllers. This lecture will be a bit different than the two previous ones. We'll concentrate on a specific example and the specific solution of this problem. Okay, the end goal is, like the title said, create a tab-like navigation interface. It should consist of a scrollable container. Then we're going to fill that container with different floating tabs, and those tabs will be used to present content to the user. What we are really trying to achieve here is to make an UITabBar navigation pattern, but on a different way, maybe more interactive, maybe more interesting. We'll see. Okay, now I'm going to jump a few steps ahead, and I'm going to show you the end product. What we built here is looking kind of like this. You can see the tab bar in the top of the screen. It has 4 different tab buttons, each of them pointing to a specific tab on a canvas. Canvas is everything below the tab bar. You can see these blue rectangles. The big one is our tab. tabs are actually UI navigation controller stacks. You may have noticed that it has its own UI navigation bar, and you can also see this smaller part of another tab, which I'll just start the video, so you'll see how it works. So we tried to implement a few different ways of navigating through our tabs. One of them is swiping. The other one is just tapping the buttons on the tab bar. And we also added a few gestures, like tapping on a specific, on this small visible tab. And you just tap on it, and you make it go active. Also, this video is showing how we are pushing view controllers on top of different navigation stacks. This is how it looks on iPad. And with all these controllers spinning around, we decided to call this carousel tabs. Wow. And this is how it looks on iPhone. It's a bit different. Damjan says he likes it better on iPhone. So, okay, that's about it. So I'm going to talk about a few basic elements of our interface. First one is Canvas. Canvas is actually just an UI scroll view. It contains a set of tabs. Then we have tabs. Tabs are, like I said, for UI navigation controller stacks. They serve for content presentation. You can add as many UI view controllers on top of a stack, things like that. Okay, and of course we have tab bar. Tab bar is just a set of buttons pointing to a specific tab in Canvas. We decided to implement some stuff like infinite scrolling through our tabs to make that carousel-like effect. So also we decided to animate our size of our tabs along with our scrolling. We added some gestures like tapping, okay, and we of course encountered some problems which I will talk about later. Actually, now you can see on this screen we decided to subclass UI navigation controller. We decided and add some properties to it, like this width or height constraint property and its vertical or horizontal position inside of Canvas. Also, it has a getter for a topmost view controller, our tab. It has also a getter for a tab button index, which connects it to a specific tab button in the tab bar. You can initialize that controller with a specific root view controller and a tab button index. So about some things, problems and stuff like that. I'll go back a few slides just to see the whole, I don't know, tab-like interface is a view controller that you add as a subview to your own view controller. You initialize it with a set of tab buttons, set of tab button titles, and view controllers that will be the root controllers in our UI navigation controller stacks. First problem that we encountered was achieving proper tab positioning inside Canvas. This portion of code shows some stuff about that. You can see that we added our tab view. Tab view is a view of UI navigation controller view that we add to our to our Canvas. We then set position constraints, height and width constraints, add them to specific views that need to be added, and in the end we decide to use layer transformations to resize our tabs. So about scaling our card size, it is done with using combination of auto layout and layer animation. We decided to use layer animation to preserve content aspect ratio. We could have done it with auto layout, but it's a lot of work, and we wanted to, I don't know, go around that. So this portion of code shows the way we are scaling our tab navigation controllers. Okay. The next thing was, okay, the resizing of visible tabs is done during transition. You scroll view this scroll method. One cool thing that we decided to add was to use a nonlinear resizing function. So we use the 4-degree polynomial function that calculates our scale factor. Then about infinite scroll. To achieve that kind of effect, you need to change the order of tabs in a specific time. Okay, in this portion of code, you can see that we are first calculating the offset of our scroll view. Actually, not calculating, but getting it. Then we see if the next page in focus is the one before the last one, and that our previous content offset is smaller than the current offset point. This previous content offset, we memorize it in order to see in which direction we are swiping right now. So after when the moment happens, when we need to change order of our tabs, we take the first object from our tab list, we remove it from the list and add it on the end of the list. So when we come to the last object before this little change, it will seem that there are still tabs to scroll. After that, we need to adjust our indexes and set a new offset for our scroll view. After that, we reset our cart constraints to make everything seem okay. So actually, there are some other things, but I didn't want to talk too much about it. I want to make this short. The example project is already available on GitHub. We liked this scrolling and things like that. Perhaps you will like it. And in the future, we are planning to turn this example into a full customizable library with proper things to handle tab and things, tab appearance and things like that. That's about it for me. Okay, this is the end. Any questions?
Yeah. Basically, with the custom library, you are planning to have will be able to insert that user interface you built from the interface builder.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I would like to achieve. Actually, now you can also take that controller from the example project. You can add it to your project, try it, add just a few controllers into it, and it will work. So you have seen the link. Do we have the presentations online? So if the link is...
Yeah, they will be shared on the slideshow.
Okay, so just download it and see if it works.
Okay, some questions.
No, I want to
Okay.
Any other questions?
know.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
So thank you for watching. Thank you guys for presenting. It's been great. So see you next time.